Welcome to Tales by Felix, where every story unlocks a new world. Remember to subscribe, like and share. Let's begin. The sun hung low over the village of Oba, painting the horizon in hues of amber and gold. Dust swirled around the cracked dirt paths as Leo Adeleke, a lanky 19-year-old with eyes that burned with quiet determination, trudged home from the market. His worn sandals slapped against the earth, and a sack of yams weighed heavily on his shoulder. The air smelled of roasted corn and the faint tang of diesel from passing motorcycles. Around him, the village buzzed with life, children chasing a deflated football, women haggling over tomatoes, and men laughing over bottles of palm wine. But Leo's mind was elsewhere, tethered to a dream bigger than the boundaries of Oba. Inside the small mud brick house he shared with his parents, the air was thick with the scent of stew simmering on a kerosene stove. His mother, Mrs. Adeleke, stirred the pot with a wooden spoon, her face etched with lines of exhaustion. His father, Mr. Adeleke, sat at a rickety table, mending a fishing net with calloused hands. The weight of their struggles was palpable, a silent force that pressed against the walls of their home. "Leo, you're back," Funmi said, her voice warm but strained. She wiped her hands on her faded wrapper and smiled at her son. "How was the market?" "Same as always," Leo replied, setting the yams down with a thud. "Mama, I fixed Mr. Okoye's radio again. He gave me 500 naira this time." Tund looked up, his eyes narrowing with pride. 500. That's my boy. Always fixing things. One day, you'll fix the whole world. Leo managed a small smile, but his chest tightened. His parents' faith in him was both a gift and a burden. They saw in him what they could never achieve themselves, a way out. Leo had always been different. A boy who could dismantle a broken phone and make it sing again, who could sketch circuits on scraps of paper and dream up machines no one in Oba could fathom. But brilliance in a village like this was a spark with nowhere to catch fire. That night, as they ate their modest meal of yam and stew, Leo's thoughts drifted to the city. He'd heard stories of Lagos, where skyscrapers pierced the clouds and tech companies churned out millionaires. He wanted that life, not just for himself, but for his parents, who deserved more than a life of scraping by. "Mama, Papa," Leo began, his voice hesitant. "What if I could do more? What if I could take us out of here?" Funmi's spoon paused mid-air. "Leo, you're already doing so much. You're our hope." "But it's not enough," he said, his voice cracking. "I see you both working so hard, and I want to make it right. I want to build something big." Tund leaned forward, his eyes searching Leo's face. "Son, you've got a gift. But gifts need a place to grow. This village, it's too small for you." The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Leo nodded, his resolve hardening. He would find a way. He had to. The letter arrived on a Wednesday, delivered by a courier who looked out of place in Oba's dusty streets. Leo was outside, tinkering with a neighbor's broken fan, when the man handed him an envelope sealed with wax. His name was written in elegant cursive, and the return address bore the name Kalu Enterprises, Lagos. "Who's this from?" Leo asked, wiping sweat from his brow. The courier shrugged. "Someone important. Open it." Inside, the letter was crisp and formal, written on embossed paper that smelled faintly of ink and wealth. It was from Uncle Kalu, a distant relative Leo had never met, a man whose name was whispered in the village like a legend. Kalu was a tech mogul, the founder of Kalu Enterprises, a company that built software for banks and governments across Africa. The letter offered Leo a full scholarship to study computer science at a prestigious university in Lagos, along with an apprenticeship at Kalu Enterprises. If Leo proved himself over 7 years, Kalu promised to fund his own tech startup. Leo's hands trembled as he read the words aloud to his parents. Funmi's eyes filled with tears, and Tund clapped him on the back, laughing with a joy Leo hadn't heard in years. "This is it, Leo," Tund said. "This is the door we've been praying for." Funmi pulled him into a tight embrace. "You're going to make us proud, my son. I know it." That night, Leo couldn't sleep. He lay on his mat, staring at the thatched roof, his mind racing. The offer was a lifeline, but it came with a weight he couldn't name. Why had Uncle Kalu chosen him, a boy from nowhere? What did he expect in return? The question swirled, but one truth shone brighter than the rest. This was his chance to change everything. Lagos was a beast of a city, a chaotic symphony of honking cars, neon lights, and ambition. When Leo stepped off the bus, clutching a single duffel bag, he felt like a minnow in an ocean. Uncle Kalu's driver, a stern man named Victor, met him at the station and drove him through the city's labyrinthine streets to a gated estate in Ikoyi. The mansion was a marvel of glass and marble, with manicured lawns and a fountain that sparkled under the midday sun. Uncle Kalu greeted him at the entrance, a tall man with a commanding presence and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Welcome, Leo," he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "This is your new home." The interior was a world of opulence, chandeliers that glittered like stars, floors that gleamed like mirrors. Leo felt like an imposter, his worn sneakers squeaking against the marble. Kalu led him to a spacious room with a view of the lagoon, furnished with a desk, a laptop, and shelves of books on coding and engineering. "You'll start as an apprentice," Kalu explained over dinner that evening, his fork poised over a plate of jollof rice. "Work hard, learn fast, and in 7 years, you'll have your own company. I see potential in you, Leo. Don't waste it." Leo nodded, his heart pounding. "I won't, sir. Thank you." The next day, he began his apprenticeship. The work was grueling, long hours debugging code, analyzing data, and shadowing senior engineers. But Leo thrived. He soaked up knowledge like a sponge, his mind buzzing with ideas for new apps and systems. His colleagues, a mix of young coders and seasoned tech veterans, were impressed by his quick wit and relentless work ethic. One evening, as Leo worked late in the office, a senior engineer named Amaka leaned over his desk. "You're good, Leo," she said, her eyes narrowing with approval. "Too good, maybe. Watch your back in this place." "What do you mean?" Leo asked, puzzled. Amaka glanced around, lowering her voice. "Not everyone here likes a rising star. Especially not the boss's sons." Chukwu and Obi, Uncle Kalu's sons, were everything Leo was not, entitled, polished, and utterly unmotivated. Chukwu, the elder, was a stocky man in his late 20s with a penchant for designer suits and a permanent scowl. Obi, leaner and more calculating, had a smile that masked a sharp edge. They lived in the mansion too, but spent their days lounging by the pool or throwing lavish parties, their father's wealth a cushion they took for granted. From the moment Leo arrived, they watched him with barely concealed disdain. He was the village boy, the charity case, the interloper in their world. But as weeks turned to months, their resentment grew into something darker. Leo's success in the company was a mirror that reflected their own shortcomings. Every time Kalu praised Leo's latest project, a new algorithm, a streamlined database, the brothers' faces darkened. One night, Leo overheard them in the mansion's game room, their voices low and venomous. "He's a nobody," Chukwu spat, slamming a pool cue against the table. "Why does father keep parading him like some prodigy?" Obi leaned back in his chair, swirling a glass of whiskey. "Because he's useful. For now. But useful things can break, Chukwu. And when they do, no one misses them." Leo froze in the hallway, his heart racing. He knew they were talking about him. The words stung, but he pushed them aside. He had work to do, a future to build. He couldn't afford to let their jealousy distract him. But the brothers were already plotting. In the privacy of Obi's room, they hatched a plan. "We need him gone," Obi said, his eyes glinting. "Something permanent. Something that'll make father see him for the fraud he is." Chukwu grinned, a cruel edge to his smile. "A data breach. Pin it on him. He's always on that laptop. It'll be easy." Despite the undercurrents of hostility, Leo's star continued to rise. 6 months into his apprenticeship, he unveiled a prototype for a mobile banking app that could revolutionize rural finance. The app used blockchain technology to secure transactions, making it accessible even in areas with spotty internet. Kalu was ecstatic, calling Leo into his office to congratulate him personally. "This is brilliant, Leo," Kalu said, leaning back in his leather chair. "You've got a mind for this. Keep it up, and you'll be running your own division someday." Leo beamed, his chest swelling with pride. "Thank you, sir. I just want to make a difference." "You already are," Kalu said, his tone softening. "You remind me of myself when I was your age. Hungry. Determined. The praise fueled Leo's ambition. He worked harder, staying late to refine his code, sketching new ideas in a battered notebook he carried everywhere. His colleagues began to look to him for guidance, and even Amaka, the skeptical engineer, admitted he was a natural leader. But with every step forward, the brothers' resentment deepened. They watched from the sidelines, their whispers growing more urgent. One afternoon, as Leo presented his app to a group of investors, Chukwu slipped into the server room. His fingers flew over a keyboard, planting a malicious virus in the company's system. Obi, meanwhile, installed a keylogger on Leo's laptop, ensuring every keystroke would point to him. "That's it," Obi said later, a smirk playing on his lips. "When the system crashes, it'll look like Leo sold us out. Father will never trust him again." Chukwu nodded, his eyes gleaming with malice. "And we'll be there to pick up the pieces." Leo, oblivious to the storm brewing, continued his work, unaware that the golden cage he'd entered was about to become a trap. The air in the server room was cool, humming with the soft whir of machines and the faint glow of LED lights. Chukwu hunched over a terminal, his fingers dancing across the keyboard with a precision that belied his usual laziness. Beside him, Obi leaned against a rack of servers, his eyes darting to the door. The brothers had chosen this moment carefully. Midnight, when the office was a ghost town, and Leo was likely asleep in his room at the mansion. "This virus is perfect," Chukwu muttered, his voice low and gleeful. "It'll wipe out the client database, scramble the financials, and leave a trail straight to Leo's laptop." Obi smirked, his arms crossed. "And the keylogger? You're sure it's tied to his credentials?" "Like a noose," Chukwu replied, hitting the final key with a flourish. "Every move he makes on that laptop will scream guilt. Father will think he sold our secrets to a competitor." Obi's smile faded, replaced by a flicker of unease. "What if Father digs deeper? He's not stupid." Chukwu waved a hand dismissively. "He won't. Leo's the golden boy, but he's still an outsider. One whiff of betrayal, and Father will cut him loose. Trust me." The brothers exchanged a glance, their pact sealed in the dim light. They had grown up in the shadow of their father's empire, handed every privilege but earning none of it. Leo's arrival had exposed their inadequacy, and now they would ensure he paid for it. As they slipped out of the server room, the virus began its silent work, burrowing into the heart of Kalu Enterprises. Meanwhile, Leo sat at his desk in the mansion, oblivious to the trap tightening around him. His laptop screen glowed with lines of code, his latest project, a security patch for the banking app he'd developed. He rubbed his eyes, exhausted but driven. The clock read 12:15 a.m. He was close to a breakthrough, and the thought of presenting it to Uncle Kalu tomorrow fueled his resolve. Outside, the Lagos night buzzed with distant traffic and the hum of cicadas. Leo didn't hear the faint click of the server room door closing or the soft footsteps of the brothers retreating to their rooms. He didn't know that his world was about to collapse. The chaos erupted at 8:03 a.m. Leo was in the office, sipping a cup of bitter instant coffee, when the first shouts echoed down the hall. Amaka burst into the cubicle area, her face pale. "Leo, get to the main server room. Now." He followed her, heart pounding, as employees scrambled around them. The server room was a war zone, technicians hunched over monitors, their screens flashing red with error codes. Uncle Kalu stood at the center, his face a mask of fury. "What's happening?" Leo asked, his voice barely audible over the chaos. Amaka's eyes were grim. "A data breach. Someone hacked the system last night. Client records, financials, intellectual property, gone. System, it's all gone." Leo's stomach dropped like a stone. "All of it?" "Everything," she confirmed, her voice tight. "The blockchain security for the banking app, the client database, even the proprietary algorithms. Stolen. And the trail leads back to your laptop." "My laptop." Leo's voice cracked. "That's impossible. I didn't." "Save it," Amaka snapped, though her eyes softened with pity. "Kalu wants you in his office. Now." The walk to Kalu's office felt like a march to the gallows. Employees avoided his gaze, their whispers trailing him like shadows. Inside, Kalu sat behind his massive desk, his face a storm cloud. Chukwu and Obi stood nearby, their expressions unreadable. Explain this, Kalu said, tossing a stack of printouts onto the desk. They showed logs of unauthorized access, all time-stamped from Leo's device. Leo's mouth went dry. Sir, I swear, I didn't do this. I was working on a security patch last night. The evidence is clear, Kalu interrupted, his voice cold. Your laptop. Your credentials. The keylogger recorded every move. It's not me. Leo's voice rose, desperate. Someone must have planted it. I would never betray you. Chukwu stepped forward, his tone dripping with mock sympathy. Leo, we trusted you. Father gave you everything, and this is how you repay him. Obi nodded, his eyes glinting. The logs don't lie. Leo's fists clenched. You're lying. Both of you. I know you've hated me from the start. Kalu's hand slammed on the desk. Enough. I took you in, gave you a chance, and you spit in my face. You're done here, Leo. The words hit like a physical blow. Leo's knees buckled, but he forced himself to stand tall. Sir, please. Check the logs again. I can prove. Get out, Kalu said, his voice low and final. Before I call security. Leo's eyes burned with tears he refused to let fall. He turned and walked out, the weight of 100 accusing stares pressing down on him. The brothers' smug faces were the last thing he saw before the door closed behind him. Back at the mansion, Leo packed his few belongings in a daze. The room that had once felt like a dream now mocked him with its luxury. He slung his duffel bag over his shoulder and headed for the main hall, where Kalu waited by the front door. I trusted you, Kalu said, his voice heavy with betrayal. I brought you into my home, my company, and you stole from me. Leo's throat tightened. Uncle Kalu, I didn't do it. I swear on my life. Someone set me up. Kalu's eyes narrowed. The evidence is ironclad. You accessed restricted files, sold them to a rival firm. Do you know what this breach cost me? I didn't do it. Leo shouted, his voice breaking. Please, just give me a chance to prove it. I can find the real culprit. Kalu's face hardened. You've had your chance. Leave, Leo. And don't come back. As Leo stepped into the humid Lagos night, the gate clanged shut behind him. The sound echoed like a prison door slamming. He stood on the street, the city's neon lights blurring through his tears. His scholarship was gone. His apprenticeship was over. His dream lay in ashes. He walked aimlessly, the weight of his bag dragging at his shoulder. The city that had once dazzled him now felt like a predator, its noise and chaos swallowing him whole. He had no money, no plan, no hope. The brothers had one. The first night was the hardest. Leo found a spot under a bridge in Yaba, where the stench of refuse mingled with the damp air. He curled up on a piece of cardboard, his duffel bag as a pillow, and stared at the stars peeking through the city's haze. The betrayal replayed in his mind like a broken record, Chukwu's smirk, Obi's cold eyes, Kalu's final words. He clenched his fists, anger and despair warring in his chest. By morning, hunger drove him to action. He wandered into a bustling market, where vendors hawked everything from roasted plantain to second-hand phones. A woman with a weathered face and a sharp gaze caught his attention as she struggled with a flickering mobile phone. It's broken, she grumbled, tossing it onto her stall. Useless thing. Leo hesitated, then spoke. I can fix it. For a small fee. She eyed him skeptically. You. A kid. How much? 500 naira, he said, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. She snorted but handed him the phone. Leo sat cross-legged on the ground, using a small toolkit he'd kept in his bag. In 10 minutes, the phone was working again, its screen glowing brightly. The woman's jaw dropped. You're a wizard, she said, handing him the money. Come back tomorrow, eh? Word spread quickly. By the end of the week, Leo was fixing phones, radios, and even an old laptop for market vendors. Each job earned him a few naira, enough to buy bread and water. But the work was a far cry from the tech empire he'd dreamed of. Every night, as he curled up under the bridge, he wondered if this was all his life would be now. Weeks turned into months, and Leo adapted to life on the streets. System, He learned to navigate the city's underbelly, finding the cheapest food stalls and the safest corners to sleep. His hands, once soft from office work, grew calloused from prying open broken electronics. His mind, however, never stopped churning. Every spare naira went to buying scrap parts, which he used to tinker with new ideas in the dim light of street lamps. One afternoon, while repairing a cracked smartphone screen in the Oshodi market, Leo noticed an older man watching him. The man was dressed simply, but his posture and sharp eyes suggested authority. He introduced himself as Mr. Davison, a retired tech entrepreneur who now ran a small electronics shop. "You've got talent," Davison said, his voice gravelly but kind. "Where'd you learn to do that?" Leo hesitated, then told a half-truth. "Self-taught, mostly. I've always loved fixing things." Davison nodded, his gaze appraising. "Ever thought about building something of your own?" Leo's heart skipped. "I used to dream about it. But things didn't work out." Davison handed him a business card. "Come by my shop tomorrow. I've got a proposition for you." That night, Leo lay awake, clutching the card like a lifeline. For the first time in months, a spark of hope flickered in his chest. He didn't know what Davison wanted, but he knew one thing. He wasn't done fighting. The Oshodi market was a living beast, its pulse a cacophony of hawkers' shouts, motorcycle horns, and the sizzle of akara frying in hot oil. Leo knelt in the shade of a battered umbrella, his fingers deftly reassembling a cracked tablet for a fruit vendor named Mama Ngozi. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his focus was unbreakable, each movement precise as he soldered a loose connection. The tablet flickered to life, earning a delighted gasp from Mama Ngozi. "You're a miracle worker, Leo," she said, pressing a crumpled 1,000 naira note into his hand. "Don't let this city eat you up, you hear?" Leo managed a tired smile. "I'm trying, Mama." As she walked away, Leo's eyes caught a figure lingering nearby, an older man with graying hair and a weathered face, dressed in a simple agbada that belied the sharpness in his gaze. He'd been watching Leo for days, always at a distance, never speaking. Today he approached. "You're good with your hands," the man said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen the world. "Name's Davison. Used to run a tech company. Now I tinker in a shop not far from here." Leo wiped his hands on his threadbare shirt, wary but curious. "I'm Leo. What do you want?" Davison chuckled, unfazed by the bluntness. "Not want. Offer. You've got a gift, boy. But fixing tablets in a market won't get you where you're meant to be." Leo's heart quickened, but he kept his expression guarded. "I've heard promises before. They don't always pan out." Davison nodded, his eyes softening with understanding. "Fair enough. Come by my shop tomorrow. No strings, just a conversation. I think you'll like what I have to say." He handed Leo a card, its edges worn but the print crisp. Davison Tech Solutions, Yaba. Leo stared at it, the flicker of hope he'd felt the night before reigniting. As Davison walked away, blending into the market's chaos, Leo clutched the card tightly, a lifeline in a sea of uncertainty. Davison's shop was a cluttered sanctuary of wires, circuit boards, and half-built gadgets, tucked between a barber shop and a tailor's stall in Yaba. The air smelled of solder and dust, and a single fan whirred lazily against the Lagos heat. Leo stepped inside, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder, feeling like a stranger in a world he'd once dreamed of owning. Davison sat at a workbench, peering through a magnifying glass at a microchip. He looked up and grinned. "You came. Good." Leo shifted uncomfortably. "You said you had a proposition. Straight to the point, eh?" Davison leaned back, wiping his hands on a rag. "I've got a failing startup. Used to be mine, years ago. Built it from nothing, then sold it to some investors who ran it into the ground. I bought it back cheap, but it's a mess, bad code, worse management. I need someone to fix it." Leo frowned. "Why me? You don't even know me." "I know enough," Davison said, his eyes sharp. "I've seen you in the market, turning junk into gold. You've got grit, and you've got talent. I'm offering you a job. Take over the startup. Turn it around in 18 months, and I'll give you a 50% stake." Leo's breath caught. It was a chance to rebuild, to reclaim the dream that had been stolen. But doubt gnawed at him. "What's the catch?" No catch, Davison said. But it's not easy. The company's bleeding money. You'll have to work harder than you ever have. Fail and we both lose. Succeed, and you're on your way to something big. Leo's mind raced. The weight of his past betrayal pressed against the spark of hope Davison's offer ignited. He thought of his parents, still toiling in Oba, and the brothers who'd framed him. This was his shot to prove them wrong. I'm in, he said, his voice steady. When do I start? Davison's grin widened. Now. Let's get to work. The startup, called Nexus Innovations, was a ghost of its former self. Its office was a cramped space above a noisy bar, with flickering fluorescent lights and desks cluttered with outdated computers. The remaining staff, 3 overworked coders and a skeptical accountant, greeted Leo with raised eyebrows. He was younger than they expected, dressed in faded jeans and a t-shirt, but his intensity silenced their doubts. Leo dove in headfirst. By day, he pored over the company's codebase, untangling a mess of buggy software. By night, he sketched new ideas, blending his street-honed ingenuity with the skills he'd learned at Kalu Enterprises. He worked with a ferocity that startled even Davison, sleeping on a cot in the office to save time. One evening, as Leo debugged a payment processing module, one of the coders, a wiry woman named Temi, leaned over his shoulder. "You're crazy, you know that," she said, half laughing. "You're trying to rebuild this whole system from scratch." "Not from scratch," Leo replied, his eyes fixed on the screen. "From what's good. There's still something worth saving here." Temi shook her head, impressed. "You're either a genius or a madman. Maybe both." Leo's vision was bold, a platform that combined secure mobile payments with microloans for small businesses, tailored for markets like Oshodi. He used his knowledge of rural economies, learned from his years in Oba, to design features that were intuitive for users with limited tech access. He worked tirelessly, fueled by the memory of his parents' faith and the sting of Kalu's rejection. Months passed, and Nexus began to transform. The platform's beta launch attracted a small but loyal user base, and revenue trickled in. Leo's leadership inspired the team, who began to see him not as a kid from the streets but as a visionary. Davison watched from the sidelines, his confidence in Leo growing with each milestone. "You're doing it," Davison said one night, clapping Leo on the shoulder as they reviewed user metrics. "This company's got a pulse again." Leo allowed himself a small smile. "It's not enough yet. But it's a start." 18 months later, Nexus Innovations was unrecognizable. The office had moved to a sleek building in Ikeja, its walls lined with awards and press clippings. Leo's platform had exploded in popularity, serving millions of users across Nigeria and beyond. Its microloan feature empowered small vendors like Mom Ngozi, while its security rivaled global standards. Investors poured in, and Nexus's valuation soared into the tens of millions. Leo, now 21, stood at the helm of an empire. His face graced tech magazines, his name synonymous with innovation. At a launch event for Nexus's international expansion, he stood on a stage, dressed in a tailored suit, addressing a crowd of industry leaders. "This isn't just about technology," he said, his voice steady but passionate. "It's about giving people a chance, people like my parents, who work hard every day but never get a break. Nexus is their platform, their future." The crowd erupted in applause, but Leo's mind drifted to Oba, to the mud brick house where his parents still lived. He'd sent them money, enough to ease their burdens, but he hadn't gone home yet. Not until he was ready to show them what he'd built. Backstage, Davison pulled him aside. "You've done it, Leo. You've built something bigger than I ever dreamed. What's next?" Leo's eyes gleamed with determination. "This is just the beginning. I want Nexus to change the world." But even as he basked in his triumph, a shadow lingered. The brothers who'd framed him were still out there, living in the ruins of their father's empire. Leo hadn't forgotten their betrayal, and he knew their story wasn't over. Far from the glittering lights of Leo's new world, Uncle Kalu sat in his office, his empire crumbling. The data breach had cost Kalu Enterprises dearly. Clients defected, lawsuits piled up, and the company's reputation lay in tatters. Kalu had grown gaunt, his once commanding presence eroded by regret. One evening, a forensic analyst delivered a bombshell. "Sir, we've traced the virus," she said, sliding a report across his desk. It wasn't Leo. The keylogger was planted from a device registered to your sons, Chukwoo and Obi. Kalu's hands trembled as he read the report. The truth hit him like a tidal wave. His own sons had betrayed him, framing an innocent boy to protect their fragile egos. Rage and shame warred within him as he summoned Chukwoo and Obi to his office. "You did this," he said, his voice low and venomous. "You destroyed my company, my trust. For what?" "Jealousy." Chukwoo stammered, his usual bravado gone. "Father, we were just—" "Silence!" Kalu roared. "You're no sons of mine. Get out of my house, my company, my life." The brothers' fall was swift and brutal. Stripped of their inheritance, they faced criminal charges for the breach. Their lavish lifestyle evaporated, replaced by rented rooms in a run-down part of Lagos. Chukwoo took a job as a nightclub bouncer, his designer suits replaced by a cheap uniform. Obi, ever the schemer, tried to hustle his way back, but no one trusted him. Their names, once synonymous with privilege, became a cautionary tale. Meanwhile, Leo's star continued to rise. A news report about Kalu Enterprises' collapse reached him, detailing the brothers' disgrace. He watched the footage in his office, his expression unreadable. The past was catching up, but Leo wasn't ready to confront it. Not yet. He had an empire to build, and the world was watching. The road to Oba was narrower than Leo remembered, its red earth rutted from years of rain and neglect. He sat in the back of a sleek black SUV, the hum of the engine a stark contrast to the creaking buses of his childhood. The village came into view as the sun dipped low, casting golden light over mud-brick homes and fields of yam and cassava. Children paused their games to stare, and women carrying baskets gaped as the vehicle rolled through the dusty streets. Leo's heart pounded as he approached his family's home. The mud-brick house looked smaller now, its walls weathered but still standing. He stepped out, dressed in a tailored blazer and crisp shirt, a far cry from the boy who'd left 3 years ago with nothing but a duffel bag. His mother, Funmi, was sweeping the front yard, her movements slow with age. She froze when she saw him, the broom slipping from her hands. "Leo!" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Mama!" he said, his throat tight. He crossed the yard in 3 strides and pulled her into a hug, her familiar scent of wood smoke and palm oil grounding him. Tears streamed down her face as she clung to him. Tund emerged from the house, his eyes widening. "My son," he said, his voice thick with pride. "You've come home." They sat inside, the small room filled with the warmth of reunion. Leo told them everything, not just the triumphs of Nexus Innovations, but the betrayal, the streets, the struggle. His parents listened, their faces a mix of awe and sorrow. "I built something for you," Leo said, pulling out a set of blueprints. "A new house, here in Oba. With running water, electricity, everything you deserve. And I'm starting a tech training center for the village kids. No one here will ever feel trapped again." Funmi's hands shook as she touched the blueprints. "Leo, you've done more than we ever dreamed." Tund clapped his shoulder, his eyes shining. "You're our miracle." That evening, the village gathered to celebrate Leo's return. Drums echoed through the night, and a bonfire lit up the faces of neighbors who'd watched him grow. They called him Oba's Pride, their voices filled with admiration. But as Leo danced under the stars, his thoughts drifted to Lagos, to the brothers who'd tried to destroy him. He wasn't done with them yet. Back in Lagos, Leo sat in his office at Nexus Innovations, a glass-walled penthouse overlooking the city's skyline. The walls were lined with awards, and a flat-screen TV played a news channel on mute. He was reviewing expansion plans when a headline caught his eye: Kalu Enterprises files for bankruptcy. Founder's sons face criminal charges. Leo unmuted the TV. The reporter's voice filled the room, detailing the downfall of Chukwoo and Obi. Once heirs to a tech empire, the brothers are now destitute, living in a slum after their father disowned them for orchestrating a devastating data breach. The screen showed grainy footage of Chukwoo, his face haggard, working as a bouncer outside a seedy bar. Obi was next, caught on camera selling knockoff electronics in a market, his once polished demeanor replaced by desperation. The reporter mentioned their upcoming trial, with prison time looming. Leo leaned back, his expression unreadable. The sight of their fall stirred a complex mix of emotions, satisfaction, but also a pang of pity. They'd taken everything from him, but seeing them now, broken and humbled, felt like a mirror of his own past. He'd been where they were, sleeping under bridges, scraping by. The difference was, he'd fought his way out. Temmie, now his lead engineer, knocked on the door. "You saw the news?" she asked, nodding at the TV. "Yeah," Leo said, his voice quiet. "It's over for them." "Is it?" Temmie raised an eyebrow. "You've got that look, Leo. Like you're planning something." He didn't respond, but a seed of an idea took root. Revenge would be easy. Let them rot in their misery. But Leo had learned something on the streets. True power wasn't in destruction, but in creation. He turned off the TV and stood. "I need to make a trip. Clear my schedule for tomorrow." The slum was a maze of tin-roofed shacks and narrow alleys, reeking of open sewers and despair. Leo navigated it with purpose, his polished shoes out of place among the mud and refuse. He found Chukwu first, standing outside a dimly lit bar, his bouncer's uniform stained and ill-fitting. The man who'd once sneered at Leo from a mansion now looked small, his eyes hollow. "Chukwu," Leo said, his voice steady. Chukwu froze, his face paling. "Leo? What are you doing here?" "I came to see you," Leo said, his gaze unwavering. "And Obi?" Chukwu's shoulders slumped. "He's at the market, a few streets over." "Why?" "To gloat." Leo didn't answer. He found Obi in a crowded market stall, haggling over a pile of second-hand chargers. Obi's eyes widened when he saw Leo, his hands trembling as he dropped a cable. "Leo," Obi stammered. We didn't expect." "Save it," Leo cut in, his voice calm but firm. "I know what you did. The virus, the keylogger, the lies. You took everything from me." Chukwu, who'd followed, hung his head. "We were stupid, Leo. Jealous. We didn't think." "You didn't think I'd survive," Leo finished. "But I did. And now I'm here." Obi fell to his knees, his voice breaking. "Please, Leo. We're sorry. We've lost everything, our father, our home, our future. Have mercy." Leo looked at them, the weight of their betrayal heavy in the air. He could walk away, let the law and their own guilt finish them. But another path, harder but truer, called to him. "Get up," he said. "I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to offer you a chance." The next morning, Chukwu and Obi sat across from Leo in a small conference room at Nexus Innovations. They looked out of place, their worn clothes clashing with the sleek furniture. Leo leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "I'm offering you jobs," he said. "Entry level. Data entry, system maintenance, the grunt work. You'll start at the bottom, like I did. You'll earn minimum wage, and you'll answer to supervisors who won't care who you used to be." Chukwu's jaw dropped. "You're hiring us? After what we did?" "Why?" Obi asked, his eyes narrow with suspicion. Leo's gaze was steady. "Because I know what it's like to have nothing. I could let you rot, but that's not who I am. You'll work hard, and you'll follow my rules. Break them, and you're out. Prove yourselves, and maybe you'll earn back a shred of respect." The brothers exchanged a glance, their faces a mix of shame and disbelief. Chukwu spoke first, his voice hoarse. "We don't deserve this." "No, you don't," Leo said. "But I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because I believe in second chances. Don't waste this one." Obi nodded slowly. "We won't." "Thank you, Leo." As they left to sign their contracts, Leo felt a weight lift. He hadn't forgiven them, not fully, but he'd chosen a path that honored his own journey. He thought of his parents, of the village kids who'd soon have a tech center to dream in. This was his legacy, not revenge. A year later, Nexus Innovations was a global name, its valuation in the billions. Leo stood on a stage in Silicon Valley, accepting an award for innovation. The crowd was a sea of tech giants and investors, their applause thunderous. But Leo's mind was on Oba, where his parents now lived in a modern house with solar panels and a garden blooming with hibiscus. Back in Lagos, the tech training center in Oba was thriving, its first class of students already building apps for local farmers. Chukwu and Obi, true to their word, worked diligently at Nexus, their arrogance replaced by quiet determination. They weren't friends, but they were proof that redemption was possible. Leo returned to his office after the award ceremony, the city lights sprawling below. He opened his old notebook, its pages filled with sketches from his days on the streets. A single line, written in his own hand, stood out. Build a world where character matters more than power. He'd done that. Not by crushing his enemies, but by lifting others up. The brother's betrayal had been the spark, but his integrity had built the empire. As he looked out at the city, Leo knew this was his true victory, not wealth or fame, but a legacy of hope. The end.